Now I want to explain why token holders are not your users inherently. I've mentioned this, sorry about that. I mentioned this in the staking video and in the burning video, and I think in the governance video maybe as well. But I wanted to clarify exactly what I mean by this. So a lot of people don't really understand that there's a difference between people who are just simply, holding your token, right? And then people who are actually using your product, whatever it is. They're using the product, the service, maybe you're on exchange, maybe you're a marketplace. They're actually involved with what you're doing. And this is a very, very key point, because if you don't realize that your token holders are not the same as your users, you may be incentivized, if you will, or you may think it's a good idea to reward people unnecessarily. So in the staking video, it was the fact that, if you're just simply rewarding stakers with some sort of yield, with some sort of APY, then you're not necessarily rewarding your users, right? Let's look at the example of, again, let's assume that you're a hyperliquid or whatever, right? You have people who are trading, right? They're generating you fees, they're generating money, they are generating volume for you, whatever, for the platform, and you can use that money to scale the team. You can use the money to invest into research and development, to improve the platform, whatever it is. These people, they're just holding the hype token. They're not doing anything, right? Of course there is overlap, right? You need to remember, of course there is overlap, right? So for example, these will be your users, and then these would be, actually that can be your token holders, and then these will be your users. And of course there is overlap, right? But if you just allow people to buy the token, stake it, and then earn some sort of yield on it, you're fundamentally either taxing these users directly, and that's where the yield comes from. I mean, maybe like trading fees or something like that. Or you're using some of the revenue that they generate you to buy back the token and give that as the yield. You're rewarding people who are not your users. And all you're doing is you're taking the value from your users, whether it's directly taxing them or whether it's indirectly, opportunity cost, instead of improving their user experience, instead of improving the platform, instead of kind of growing the amount of users and revenue you generate, you instead reward random vagrants, in essence, random people who have never added any value. You're leaking value from your ecosystem. You're just giving it away for no reason. A good example that that I have written in the article, token holders are not your users, is one of a coffee shop. So for example, imagine there's a road over here, and imagine there is a coffee shop, right? So this coffee shop has good Wi-Fi, right? And this is the window, right? It has good Wi-Fi, and a lot of people go into the coffee shop, and there's a lot of people in here. And as you're walking past, right? You're walking past over here, this is you. And you're like, oh my God, there are so many people in this coffee shop. It must be good. So you go in, you buy a coffee, you give them some revenue. You buy a coffee, you sit down, one of these people here. And you're drinking the coffee, and eventually you leave. If the coffee shop takes that money and then they reinvest it into simply improving the Wi-Fi, right? They reinvest all of it into improving the Wi-Fi. One day you're going to come in, you're going to buy the coffee, and you're going to be like, this is actually pretty bad, right? Maybe there's another coffee shop that opens right next door, right? Like a Starbucks or something, right? A Starbucks opens up next door or whatever, right? And you're like, this is actually pretty bad. I'm wasting so much money here. I could just be making coffee at home. You are now not coming back. That's it. You're not coming back. You're not going to spend any more money here, right? So this is gone, and now you're gone from here. However, this the coffee shop has invested into Wi-Fi, so they have a lot more people coming in for the Wi-Fi, right? So it still looks very busy, even though you're not there. Now there's more people for the Wi-Fi, but these people who are using the Wi-Fi, they're not actually buying coffee, and if they are, they might not be buying a lot. So maybe they come in, they buy like one coffee, maybe they don't even give you any revenue whatsoever. They make the shop look busy, in the same way that having a lot of token holders can increase your TVL and can increase your market cap and can increase your actual kind of token holders or unique active wallets or whatever, and make the shop look busy. So even though you have left, someone else is here and they're like, oh my God, look how busy this shop is. I'm going to go in and I'm going to try the coffee. Eventually though, because you keep reinvesting into the Wi-Fi, these people will not come. These people be like, nah, the coffee here is shit, right? And then what happens when Starbucks over here decides, you know what, why don't we also start offering Wi-Fi, right? And because they've been making all of this money from people coming in to their, to their shop for actual coffee, they actually have better Wi-Fi. So immediately, within like, I don't know, a week, all of these people are now at Starbucks. So now you not only have no revenue because the people the people there for the Wi-Fi, they're not spending any money, right? You not only don't have any revenue, you also don't have any people, because people are there like, well, why would I go here when there's better coffee elsewhere, right? And you shut down. It's game over. Thank you for playing, but you're now dead. Your token has now gone like that. It is now 0. You look like a rug. Your reputation is ruined. All those years that you've spent building this are wasted, and good game. Thanks for playing. This is the exact same thing that happens when you reward people who are not your users. And you need to make sure that you understand what your users are doing and reward that specific activity. So for example, if you do want to offer people some sort of % APY for staking, because staking in general is quite good because it reduces the floating supply, it reduces the velocity, people have to buy the token to stake it, right? So it's good for your token price initially, right? It's good for this. The problem is, right? The problem is you don't have very long. So let's say this is time, and then this is value, right? By staking, by giving like the sort of APY to staking, you increase the value of your token, right? Because you have a lot of users. Let's say this green line is actually the users, right? You have a lot of users initially, well, what you think are users, but they're actually just token holders, but you have a lot of them. The problem is when the Starbucks comes in, all these people leave. Now, it's a lot easier to get these users. This is much easier because you're giving them an APY. Maybe you're just minting new tokens. Maybe you allocated some tokens in your tokenomics to reward people for staking, right? It's very easy to onboard these people. On the flip side, actually, you know what? This probably should be red, like that. On the flip side, in green are your actual users. Now, it's very difficult to get them initially, but then the amount of value that you get from them, the quantity of them, and just the sheer value in revenue and whatever else grows faster with time, like it grows exponentially. So what this shows us is you have between here and here, you have this amount of time to convert your token holders, into users. And if you fail to do so, if you don't convert a substantial amount of your token holders into users, well, then they will leave and you don't have this green line over here because you failed to do this. So they will leave and then that's it, game over, right? And of course, one can argue that, well, as you have the token holders, you also are growing the users. Yes, but the point here is if you're growing token holders, you're not growing the users to the best of your ability. You're rewarding people who should not be rewarded, and therefore it's harder to do this. And in reality, your chart will look something like this, right? Because you're not incentivizing actual users to come in. You're focusing on the token holders, and you're wasting money, you're wasting capital and resources. So again, people will leave, and then way too low. This isn't enough revenue. You have to fire staff. That looks bearish. Your token price dies, and good game. Thanks for playing. So the way that you make sure that you convert these people into users, or the way that you avoid this problem from the get-go, is you need to make sure that your yield or your rewards or whatever are tied to your utilities. Now, I mentioned this in the staking video, but here's another example. Let's say you want to reward people for staking. Well, you make sure that you don't reward them for staking. You make sure that you reward them for providing liquidity into the liquidity pool. So they provide the liquidity, and then anyone that's in here providing liquidity, they're the ones that are earning the reward. It's a win-win, right? Because these people are making the platform better for your actual users, right? Because there's more liquidity, less slippage, lower fees, whatever, and they're getting rewarded, right? Another thing that you can do, which I mentioned, in the other video, is, for example, you're rewarding people for governing. So you have like some sort of governance proposal or governance system, and people are participating in that, and then they're getting rewarded for it. Maybe it's very critical for you to have governance. Maybe you're rewarding people for running, validator nodes, right? Or for delegating their tokens to the validator nodes. Because if you delegate to the validator node, you increase their reputation score, which means that that validator node will be selected to validate more often, so they get higher income. But delegators should also be rewarded, because they obviously would want to delegate to the best validators that are already getting a lot of the transactions to validate. They don't want to delegate to the bad validators. So the delegators inherently support benevolence and good quality validation, which is good for the system. So you reward the validators and you reward the delegators as well. Maybe this is a way that you can give people APY, but you cannot just allow people to stake and earn money, right? It doesn't make sense. That's not how business operates. Not how business is run. And if you do this, if you align your staking and your rewards with the actual users, if your users are the ones that will be doing this, and even if they're not using the product, they're at least adding value, right? So this token holder, he may never use your exchange, but he's at least providing LP. He's at least governing. Maybe he won't be governing, to be honest, but maybe he's delegating to a successful validator, right? He's adding value, and that's what makes him a user. Right? Not technically by English definition, but he's adding value still, so it's fine to reward him. If the only value that they add is short-term value for the token, so just like an increase in market cap, an increase in wallets, an increase in TVL, whatever, if that's the only value that they add, just remember, they will leave. They will leave in 6 months, and if you haven't converted that short-term value into long-term value, you're going to fail. A little caveat here is another thing to consider is, you can convert this value by, you have all these token holders, your token market cap is quite high. Maybe you're just selling tokens, right? Maybe you don't necessarily need to do all of this. Of course, this is very good on a fundamental level, but on a super high level, kind of like as a backup plan, whilst your token is high, maybe you just sell more tokens, right? And therefore you build up a treasury of dollars so that when all these people leave, you can buy back some tokens. Or maybe because you're selling the tokens, you can then redistribute the income, or rather reinvest into research and development, improving the platform, maybe doing some more marketing, maybe reducing fees for your actual users. Like, you don't have to actually convert the token holders into users, and you don't necessarily need to have, well, actually no, you kind of do. You kind of need to make sure that you're rewarding your actual users, or at least people who are providing value. That you must do, otherwise it's just a bit silly, right? But you don't necessarily need to convert the token holders into users per se. You just need to make sure that the value that you get from your token holders is applicable to the users. Like, for example, in the case of the coffee shop, if you had maybe for 30 minutes you can use the Wi-Fi, but then if you want to use it for 5 hours, you have to pay £2 or £3, or you have to buy a coffee. Then you can, you're charging those people, you're giving them the benefits still, but you're charging them, and then you can reinvest that revenue into improving your coffee, right? That's how you have to think about it. So token holders are inherently not the same as your users, and vice versa, and you need to understand that when you're designing your utilities and thinking about how to reward people, who to reward, and just understanding who the actual actors are in your economy.